Vernomatic Productions.
Are you ready?
Live from the Metal Mayhem Studios in Rochester, New York.
We are gold. We are gold.
And heard around the world by metalheads just like you. This is Metal Mayhem ROC.
Heavy metal music.
Your weekly dose of metal music, interviews, album reviews, news, and more. Want to be part of the show? Send us a message through our website, metalmayhemroc.com, or hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. Search Metal Mayhem ROC.
It's getting nice and heavy.
Now, welcome our hosts, John the Vernomatic Verno, and direct from New Jersey, Metal Walt.
Good evening, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well, staying safe, staying healthy, and enjoying the beginning of Rocktober. Wow, can't believe it. October. What happened to the 2025? Well, in any case, tonight we welcome back our old buddy Keith Roth from Sirius Satellite Radio and the Rockstrap podcast up here at Pantheon Music Network and several other projects, the Dictators and whatnot. Well, we invited Keith on to help us acknowledge and celebrate the 5-year anniversary of the passing of Eddie Van Halen. Not sure if it's really a celebration as much as an acknowledgement, as Eddie reaches all of us in different ways. Well, the three of us, myself, Metal Walt, my co-host, and Keith Roth, we share what Van Halen meant to us. We share run-ins with the band, with Eddie, times we saw him, first time we saw him, memorable concerts, memorable songs, just a general Van Halen discussion. You know what? We all have been taken by Eddie Van Halen in some particular way. Myself, my favorite band, all time. Christ, I even wanted to name my first son Eddie Van Verno. That should tell you something. So that's coming up in just a minute. Just a quick reminder, head up to metalmayhemroc.com and sign up for the newsletter. We're running a contest. Now, the band Kings of Thrash, Dave Ellefson, Jeff Young, their early Megadeth lineup, they're on tour and they're coming up to Rochester on October 21st for a show at the Photo City Music Hall up here in Rochester. Well, we're giving away free tickets to the 2 pairs of tickets to the show. All you got to do is sign up for the newsletter and we will pick a couple winners. Now, when you sign up for the newsletter, it's really important these days because it's a chance to get into contests like this. Whenever we get extra swag or music from record labels and publicists, we'll give it away. And also, it's just, at the very least, you get earlier alerts on new episodes on the podcast, on the YouTube channel, reminders for our show on Monday nights, the radio show that I produce and host. So again, that's metalmayhemroc.com. Check out the merch page. Tons of cool stuff up there. Hoodies, t-shirts, phone cases, drink tumblers, and catch up on some past episodes. Last week, we had Courtney Cox of Burning Witches talking about their new album. A couple weeks before that, James Rivera of Hellstar. We've had Ian Hill of Judas Priest recently, Glenn Hughes of Deep Purple fame. So it's all up at metalmayhemroc.com. And if you like what we're doing here, subscribe to the pod wherever you're listening and drop us a review. It really helps new listeners find the pod. All right, let's get this going. Keith Roth, remembering Eddie Van Halen 5 years after his death. For my co-host, Metal Walt, I'm the Vernomatic, and we are Metal Mayhem ROC. Well, 5 years goes by real quick. October 6, 2020, the passing of Eddie Van Halen, and us here at Metal Mayhem ROC. We always have to do something, so we dialed up our buddy Keith Roth from Sirius XM, the Dictators, the Frankenstein 3000 to join us and reflect. Keith, welcome back to the show. How you doing, man?
Great to see you guys again, man. John and Walt had a blast. I think, what was I on last year with you guys?
Last September, about 3 weeks before the Alex Van Halen New York City appearance. And did you ever make it down to that?
I did not, but I know there's something special coming with Alex Van Halen, and you could remember on this date that I'm giving you fair warning. I can't talk about it, but Alex is up to something, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, we saw the Steve Brown and Jericho pick from the weekend. So does that have anything to do with it?
I didn't see that. What was that all about?
Well, exactly that. There's a picture of Chris Jericho and Steve Brown and Alex all together. But the caption was, I guess Jericho or Steve Brown and Alex have business ventures together.
Oh, maybe so. I just know that Alex is up to some cool stuff and you guys will dig it, but I'm sworn to secrecy, but some good stuff is coming.
All right. Well, Well, we're here today to reflect on Eddie. You know, we all have our memories of my favorite band, my favorite guy, Eddie. Walt's a big fan, yourself. Right off the bat, where were you when you found out Eddie died? How did it affect you?
I got a call from one of the guys at Sirius XM that, we found out a little bit before everybody else did. Not much longer, maybe an hour or a half hour or so. And, it felt like, wow. Eddie Van Halen don't die. David Bowie don't die. It was like, thinking like along those lines. And it was really sad. It was really hard to unpack at first. And, the Boneyard that day, I don't know if you remember, but I actually wound up posting the Eddie Van Halen tribute on the Boneyard and having people like, LL Cool J and David Frick join me and all these great stories of Edward. So when you do something like that, it, all being together, I got through it, but it was like a part of my youth died. Yeah. That was really the first reaction.
Yeah. It shook me hard. It was like, sort of unexpected. We knew he wasn't doing well. Sort of like when Neil Peart passed. Totally unexpected. Well, that was completely under the radar. Well, you're new to the Van Halen camp, if you will, got into him in the late 80s. How did it hit you? And, what was your reflection on that day?
It was tough because, again, it was just another one of these rock icons that we grew up with that's gone. And again, it's like you knew he was sick, but there was nothing for a couple of years. You just didn't hear anything about it. And you're like, okay, well, maybe Eddie's just retired or the Van Halen brothers are being weird like they always are. And you don't hear much. But it was just another gut punch to go along with Neil Peart, to go along with, Ronnie James Dio. And the list goes on and on.
Lemmy. And
it was just like an eye opener. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Edward was, he after Hendrix, there was a million great guitar players, right? We could talk about it. So many of them. And then there was Edward. And then there was another million great guitar players. But my point is that Hendrix set a barometer that wasn't touched till Van Halen came on the scene. And the one thing about Eddie is that it was all about the song. I mean, you listen to the recordings, they're not perfect. There's a lot of mistakes and blemishes in there. The vocals aren't great. And that's the beauty of the song. Eddie didn't overthink it like everybody else who try to emulate him does. He went in the studio. They made records every year. He wasn't like, one of those crazy, like obsessive, got to get the right note. It was all about the music. And that's why Van Halen was in a different league. Their songs were as good as the players. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure. You're right. All the blemishes, one takes, no overdubs in that studio. Well, it's a reflection of the 70s. They were a 70s band. They became huge in the 80s. But Keith, when did you get into Van Halen? What was your first experience with them?
I remember like yesterday. I was used to get tortured by my mother. I used to have to go clothes shopping with her, because she wanted company. Now we'd go to department stores, and you guys are old enough to remember department stores, right?
Yep.
And they'd have record departments. So I was, 10 years old, and I had my sights set on the first Cars record. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to Macy's, 34th Street, across from Madison Square Garden. And after being tortured with my mom clothes shopping, I'm going to get the Cars record. So I walk into the record department in Macy's. My mind is fixated on getting this debut Cars album. And as I'm in there, I hear "You Really Got Me." And, I have older brothers, so I knew the Kinks originally did that. And I'm like, who is this? What is this? And I never forget walking up to the guy at the counter. It's a little kid. And I said, who is this? And the enthusiasm on this guy's face, he's like, it's a brand new band from California, and they're Van Halen, and they're amazing. And that was my introduction to Van Halen right there. And I was floored, and then you get the record and you hear, a couple covers, and you're hearing, he talking about love and running with the devil. And it was just like, oh my God, this is unbelievable.
This is, Keith, for me, I was an MTV era guy, right? So I remember, I'm sure I knew Van Halen a little bit, but being 12 years old, So This Is Love was played constantly in 82 and 83. I don't know why they picked that song. It was a live clip, but it was over and over and over and over. And I think back, I was in 8th grade in 1984, and that's when the videos started. Jump, Panama, Hot for Teacher. David Lee Roth gets the stick in there. Now we got all these little sketches going on in it. And to me, every kid had Van Halen on their notebook. It was written on some field on the wall underneath the park. It was just like, which one of your friends tried to grow their hair like Eddie Van Halen, try to play the guitar, who had the coolest T-shirt? So to me, those are my first memories of Eddie Van Halen.
Great memories. Great memories. I remember having a meltdown because in 1979, Van Halen on Van Halen 2 was playing in Convention Hall in Asbury Park. Now, you know, it was easier for us to go to Madison Square Garden. You get on a train, boom, you're at Penn Station. But to go to Asbury Park, you'd have to take a train going south and get off. And like my parents were not down with it. And I was really young in 79. And, and also Cheap Trick played there at the same time, around the same time. But I was so upset not being able to see Van Halen in Asbury Park. And I talked to people all the time. And a couple of guys were actually at the Fillmore East when Zeppelin played opening for Iron Butterfly. And they were also at that Van Halen show in Asbury Park on 79 for Van Halen 2. And they said that those two concerts were the greatest concerts they ever been to in their life. So, if you think about it, the age, they could have been 19 and then 29, you know what I mean? But, I just love the band. And, I listen, to me with Sammy Hagar, that's a whole different band. It's not Van Halen, I'm pro Dave. And, but yeah, Van Halen, it just resonates my youth and the glorious times of, those teenage high school parties and the keg parties and everybody playing air guitar and punk rock. I'm a big punk rock kid too.
Yeah.
Punk rockers loved Van Halen. I remember talking to the guy from Susie and the Banshees, and he was so infatuated with David Lee Roth. And so was David Johansen. I worked with David for years, and David, loved Johansen, loved David Lee Roth because, it was the Louis Prima stuff. It was all this big band stuff and these entertainment things that they brought in. It wasn't just a hard rock, heavy metal band. There were so many different layers to that band. So I know I have ADHD and I get off the path a little bit, but, Van Halen, man. Yeah.
That's part of why we invited you here, because we knew you're great for content. Well, I fell right in the middle of both of you. I had an older brother, and he was the one that exposed me to Van Halen. I remember flipping through his albums, seeing like Rush Hemispheres, first Molly Hatchet, Nugent, State of Shock, Van Halen, what is this? But he was going to all those shows. God rest his soul, my late father told me I couldn't go until I was 13. So the first time I had a chance to see him was 81 Fair Warning.
Great tour.
I think the pinnacle of Van Halen.
I agree.
It was
totally.
The first time the Pete Angelus, David Lee Roth stage really took off. The lighting rig, the side catwalks, the enormous sound stage, and just Van Halen at their peak. And guys, you got to remember the Van Halen imagery was second to none. The fashion and just what they wore on stage. And, guys, Keith, you can attest to this. You knew what tour it was by what sneakers Eddie was wearing, what pants he had on. It's like, no, that's Van Halen too, because Dave wore the silk shirt. And so that's what made Van Halen. And it was a sign of the times too. It just wasn't Van Halen. Outside of Kiss, you knew what AC/DC, they had all their normal gear, but you know what I'm saying. So
no, I do. I mean, I never forget, when Women and Children first came out, me and my friends had taken the bus to the mall. You used to do things like that. You used to get a public transportation, go to the mall. And then we did our thing at the mall. It was like a Saturday. And when we were leaving to go home, there was older kids in the back of the bus and they had like an 8-track player and they were playing The Cradle Will Rock. And we're like, well, we knew that was new Van Halen. And we're like, whoa. And we literally went back to the mall because we weren't aware that Women and Children First had come out. Like that was the impact that music had on us, back then. And that's how I found out that, we knew it was released. You'd read in Circus Magazine. Sometimes the dates were a little tricky. They were never accurate, but, it just wraps up, girlfriends, youths, the keg parties in the woods, just nothing but good times,
Well, the Van Halen cycle was they usually released the new one in like April with the tour to start in, May. They came to Rochester every May, women and every May they're here. So you're right. It was always summertime and there's summer. When you hear Van Halen, you just think summer. So, let me ask you, how old are you? Keith?
57.
57. So I got a year on you. Oh,
right.
Yeah. So how many tours did you see? You said when was the first time you saw them?
I have to look at my ticket stubs. I'm thinking it was probably Women and Children first. My first concert ever was Led Zeppelin. My brother took me in 1977 because he went all the nights. He went all the nights, but my parents were going to a wedding in Long Island. And, back in February, I'll get to the Van Halen, my ADHD again. But
Go ahead,
he said, we're going to a wedding. Make sure, you watch, your little brother June 10th. And, when that rolled around on that Saturday, my father's like, don't forget, I'm going to see Zeppelin. And my father, can you curse on your show?
Yeah, sure.
He goes, I don't give a fuck where you're going, but you're bringing him wherever you're going. So I started going to concerts in 77. So I would say, I think it was probably, I didn't get to see Van Halen in like places like Convention Hall. I'm thinking it's probably Madison Square Garden, 1980. I know I saw Fair Warning. I know I saw Diver Down at the Meadowlands. I saw 84 at the Meadowlands. I did see him a couple times with Sammy at the Meadowlands. So I'm going to say probably 1980. I'm thinking for sure because, yeah.
It's funny, Keith, because you and I both live in New Jersey, and I kind of did everything in reverse. I saw David Lee Roth solo on Eat 'Em and Smile before I saw Van Halen. So I didn't see Van Halen till the Monsters of Rock June of 1988 show, on a Saturday, the day after I graduated high school, and then it was all the Sammy shows, and all those years up until when Dave came back in the 2007, 8, whatever years that were, but. It's funny talking about concert memories. I have a couple of great Van Halen concert memories that have nothing to do with the show themselves. The first one was driving out to Jones Beach in 1995 to see them. And it's a weeknight. I think it was with Skid Row. Yes.
I think I was there with Skid Row, actually.
Okay.
But I do remember.
Right. So we're on the Long Island Expressway or whatever highway it was, stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic. We have no booze on us. And my buddy Matt and I, we had to take the worst piss in the world. So we pull over on the side of the road and we run up the little embankment because it's bumper-to-bumper traffic, and we take a piss in the woods. Sure enough, the New York State Trooper pulls us over, runs out, and says, "You guys definitely been partying. Where are you going? Let me see the cooler in the back. Where's the booze?" And you know what? We opened it up and said, "It's nothing but Gatorades, officer. We're going to see Van Halen, and I had to take a piss." And he laughed and said, "Get out of here, man."
There's really Gatorades in there, no beers?
Swear to God, there was no beers. I was driving. I wasn't going from Jersey and back.
Yeah. And Jones Beach is a schlep, man. That's a big schlep. Yeah, it's not far in time, but the traffic. Well, that's cool. I do remember that tour. That's when Alex had the neck brace on, and Eddie had the hip thing. I remember. That was probably the last time that I actually seen those guys face to face. It's funny because I don't know if you can see this picture on my phone, but it's me and Eddie from that Monsters of Rock thing that you were just talking about.
Nice.
Can you see it?
Okay. Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. I mean, that was, I guess that was, what was that? 88?
June of 88.
And there's a fun.
Well, you know what, Keith? I'm going to hold you right there because we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Keith's going to tell us all his stories about hanging out with Van Halen. If you dig what we're doing here, subscribe to the pod, leave us a review, and share your Van Halen stories. We'll be right back.
Metal Mayhem ROC.
We're talking with Keith Roth, Sirius XM, the Dictators, and many, many other outlets. We're celebrating the 5-year anniversary observance of Eddie Van Halen's death. Keith, you've been in this game long enough. Share some of your Van Halen stories. You mentioned 88. Are there other times?
Yeah. I mean, I've told this story on the air many times, and people always ask me to tell this story a lot, but it's an ironic story. Is me and a few friends of mine, 1984, where we're kids and we would go to the city a lot, the Hard Rock Cafe. I mean, I grew up in New York and then, moved to Jersey, but, from where I lived in New Jersey, it was 25 minutes by train, blah, blah, blah. So it was one of those days, Van Halen, we were going to see him at the 84 tour. So we're walking up 56th Street and we're going to go to the Hard Rock, and we see a bunch of girls in front of the Parker Meridian Hotel. and they're all kind of like scantily dressed. And, you know, we're talking to these girls, and they were waiting for the band Arcadia, which was a Duran Duran offshoot band. So as we're talking to these lovely young ladies, one of them said, do you guys like Van Halen? And we're like, of course we like Van Halen. And she points over and she goes, well, there's David Lee Roth right there. And sure enough, it was David Lee Roth with the hair tied back, the hat on, the shades from the Panama video, you know, when he was incognito, the exact, but he's got his foot pressed up against the glass at the Parker Meridian Hotel. And he was with a very attractive brunette with short hair, very attractive, right? And my friend cannot contain himself when he sees Dave at the, you know, I mean, this is Dave, like he's the biggest rock star on the planet, and he's smoking a joint. And all of a sudden, my friend runs over to him, and when he gets in front of him, he goes, Dave, do you have any more reefer? And Dave doesn't say a word to him. He goes like, taps the girl on the shoulder, takes this massive hit, and passes it to my friend, and they walk down 56th Street. And we're like, holy shit. That was the coolest thing I've ever seen. But now we know that Van Halen's staying at the hotel, right? So Rudy Learin, who was Edward Van Halen's tech, you know, great guy. So, somebody recognized him. Now people are starting to come about. Like, you know, now that we found out the secret that Van Halen's at the Parker, somehow we found out what room he was in. I swear on my kids, right? So we get up to the floor. Now, apparently there was all kinds of security, but something had happened down in the lobby. So we know what room Eddie Van Halen's in, and we stop the elevator 2 floors before, and we take the staircase up. And as we get out of the staircase, Eddie Van Halen, we knock on the door, and he answers the door, and he goes, I'm on the phone. Wait a minute. And he slams the door. And we're like, holy shit, this is crazy. So we waited like 5 minutes, and we knocked on the door again. And he goes, I'm on the fucking phone. Wait a minute. Just give me a minute. And we're like, all right, you know, this ain't gonna happen. So we went back in the staircase, and, you know, we smoked cigarettes back then, and we're in the staircase having a puff. And we're like, you know, I'm not going to have the balls to knock on that door again. You know, after he said, I'm on the phone. Yeah, I know. But I go, let's just walk by it. And we walked out of the staircase, and I swear on my kids, Eddie Van Halen was with the key, you know, the card. That was new at that point. You know, it was before they switched over to keys. And he goes, do you guys know how to use this thing? I'm sitting here trying to open the door, and we were talking to him, and I have a photo on my Facebook where you could clearly see the room, and it was at the Parker Meridian, and we got pictures with him. He took photos with all of us, and he invited us in. I think he was really high, to be honest with you. But he gave us each a Budweiser can that I have somewhere signed. He gave me a white guitar pick with the VH on it, and we hung out with him for like 10 minutes, and Valerie was there. Valerie's mother had just left. It's like they felt, I don't know why, but what people call my classic Polaroid that's how it happened. So it started walking up 56th Street, meeting these girls, seeing David Lee Roth, and then Eddie. And if you see the picture, Eddie's got the Dice shirt on and the bandana. Now we hung out, like, you know, Alex did come out, but he didn't sign anything. And, you know, Michael was hanging out, but we didn't really even notice. He always seemed like a nice guy, but they went from the Parker Meridian. They went to the Meadowlands Hilton after that. And this was and I think that night is where they shot the Panama video to nobody at the Meadowlands. I think that they had the arena open for them where they could go, and I think they were playing because they went from the Garden to play the Meadowlands. So it was just a fluke thing. But so I met Edward the first time, and it was, and then there was a thing that came out in the Aquarian magazine like a week later. It says, for all you people that want to meet your favorite bands, do not try to meet Van Halen. It's impossible. And we had already accomplished it. And then ironically, Rudy Learin, who we'd met earlier out in front of the Parker, who was Eddie's tech, we said, hey, we met Eddie. And he's like, no, you didn't. And we showed him the picture, and I was hesitant to show it to him. I thought maybe he was going to rip it up. And he's like, you know, I'm really glad that happened for you guys. Like, he goes, and I got a photo with me and Rudy. And, I could send you that photo too. It all happened that night. But if you go on my Facebook, you could clearly see that picture with me and Edward from that day. And, you know, Edward seemed like a really great guy, you know what I mean? And then I met him on Monsters of Rock, and I met Alex that night. And Alex in a one-on-one situation seems great. He just seems like one of those guys that anything, like Paul Stanley, any more than a couple people there, kind of like they get a little edgy, but you can see that they're good stock.
Yeah.
I think talking about the Monsters of Rock 88 show, we had Herman Rarebell of the Scorpions on a couple months ago. And it was funny. I was telling him about that show. It was my first Scorpion show. And he goes over, steps away from his desk, comes back with this poster. And he goes, Walt, this is from that exact show. And he's standing on his drum riser. He goes, that's going to be in my book. I mean, what are the fucking chances of that happening?
Pretty cool.
Unbelievable.
Pretty cool.
Talking about New York City tales, Keith, fast forward to 2012, right? Van Halen was on the Different Kind of Truth tour, and there was rumors they were going to play the Café Wha. The tickets went on sale that morning. You weren't actually sure if it was going to happen. So I said, fuck it, I got to get down there. I got to get into this show. I will tell you, I tried everything, every way possible. I even brought a couple of wires. Like I went down to my basement, just grabbed whatever wires were down there. I'm going to try to sneak in. I said, I tried to tell the guy on the Bilco door at the bottom, oh no, this is for the soundboard. I have to get in. No chance I could get in, but I tried checking myself at the guest list, but it was just one of those experiences where it didn't happen. But here I am. It was January 5th, fucking freezing out. I'm standing on the streets. And I'd listen to that 65-minute show from the street. I never saw a band member until after the show when Dave rolled out in his train conductor, overalls in his hat, and he did his, out to into the cabin, gone. But unbelievable how here I am. I felt like I saw Van Halen, but I actually didn't. Were you at that one?
No, but I know a lot of people that were there. That was like a radio thing. And, at that time I was working, I was doing a show on WRAT, Carl Kraft, the program director, got invited and he was telling us all about it. And of course, Dave, I can't say if he's cool or not cool because he always does like what you're saying. Like, you don't really get close to the guy, but he's always entertaining. But, I know David Lee Roth's uncle managed or ran Café Wha. So I guess that's a place where Dave wanted to play his whole life. And he came into fruition by Van Halen getting to do that for the Different Kind of Truth. I guess that was their record release party to the press. Right? Yeah, that's a show to see. That was, listen, if I would have walked by, if I was in the city that night, I would have been standing out there with you. We would have kept trying to sneak in and try to get in. We would have got in at some point, though. Trust me.
I never had a chance to meet Van Halen, but I came close twice. February 1986, I'm a senior in high school. Me and a guy that I was doing a radio show with, we went to California. His uncle was a character actor, lived in the hills of California. So we stayed a week there. And the morning that we ended up going to see a taping of Benson and the Golden Girls, my buddy, and we did meet Benson, Robert Guillaume, and the tall chick from Golden Girls. But my buddy, his name's Cheech, Victor Carbone, his cousin says to us, now we're excited to go to the Golden Girls and Benson tape. And he goes, if you guys want to go there, we're going over to the sound stage and watching this band warm up and stuff. And we're like, nah, we're going to go there. Fellas, don't you sure as hell know that it was Van Halen rehearsing for the 5150 tour that started a month later in Louisiana.
Amazing.
And we had dinner that night. He comes back and we're all excited about meeting Benson. And he's like, yeah. Now this cat, his cousin wasn't a rock fan. It's like some band, the Van Halen. And you gotta be fucking kidding. And then showed us a picture or two. And so didn't meet him then. And then fast forward to 1991, I'm in Buffalo, New York at a Jim Kelly celebrity softball game. Jim Kelly of the Buffalo Bills.
Of course.
His son, Hunter, had a bad disease. So he had a celebrity golf tournament every year and celebrity softball game. Well, Eddie was there. I got VIP tickets inside the tent, but I didn't have enough VIP juice to get the VIP on the VIP of the tent. So Eddie was maybe 5 feet from me and he was right there, but I never had a chance to shake his hand or get a picture. So outside of front row proximity of various shows, never had a chance to meet Eddie.
I've only met him. I think like 3 times total, but he seems like, he as well, especially in smaller crowds, he just seemed like a really good guy, fun guy, good people. I know, listen, in a band, it's a family thing and, there's 10 sides to different stories and then there's the truth, but he just seemed like a really like grounded guy that came from nothing and really appreciated his fans a lot more than the fans actually think. You know, it's just that they were so big at some point, and they were so guarded. I mean, you kind of got a taste of what it was like to be John Lennon, in 1960, whatever, you know what I mean? So I think, but I think when he had the opportunity and time, I think he went out of his way for his fans. I remember, I have a funny Alex Van Halen story. When I was telling you that I met them on the Monsters of Rock, there was a party, and all the press was going on at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, right? So, we were there before and during, the show in Philadelphia, right? So I see Alex there, and I went up to him like, "Hey, Alex," I didn't want to bother him, and he's like, "Hey, and he says to me, he goes, "Yeah, when I have time, I like to talk to people and all this stuff," and and we're talking for a few minutes, and all of a sudden, somebody comes up and says to him, "This is another true story." They go, "Hey, would you mind taking a photo?" And Alex like, yeah, sure, I'll take the photo." So they hand Alex the disc camera, and what was going on, there was a wedding going on, and they asked Alex to take a photo of this guy and this girl that were dressed up for the wedding. And it was one of the funniest things ever. And he really enjoyed that. Like, he was like that. He thought that was great. But anyway, I forgot what led me to talk about that. But, you were in the same room with Eddie, and they all seem like cool guys,
Yeah, we had a chance to meet Alex at that book signing.
Oh, right.
And you're right. One-on-one, we were able to quickly how the lines wrapped around the block over at the Barnes & Noble down in New York. Mm-hmm. We waited 3 hours. We made our way inside the store in a little line. And when you finally got into the area where Alex was, they let you in 2 or 3 at a time. So there's Walt and I were there, and we're all excited. And but by the time I walked up to him, I wasn't that nervous. I walked up to him and I shook his hand. I go, "Al, this must be exciting for us to finally meet." And he gave me a big smile. And I asked him one question. And the question I asked him was, it was a little granular. I said, "I saw you at Diver Down Tour at the Carrier Dome, 1982. You guys were celebrating David Lee Roth's birthday. They brought out a big cake. And after they smothered him with it, you went running back to the drum set and you slipped on the frosting and bopped your head. Any recollection of that?" And he just looked at me. He's like, "Nah, Vern." "John, you remember my name?" He goes, "No, John, that was so many beers ago, so many tours ago, so many shows ago." He goes, "But thanks for coming to the show." And we all got pictures. But yeah, you're right. Him one-on-one is totally cool. I met David Lee Roth outside a Casino concert in 2001. Now, there was 8 of us outside the tour bus. It was up here in central New York. Waited like an hour and a half. And then he finally comes out of the tour bus, and he was acting like it was Philadelphia 1984. There's 8 of us there. And, he's looking at all the crowd doing the Dave jive, but he was cool. Signed a few things, I think I got a picture with him. I'm not sure, but never met Mike, never met Sammy. What about you, Walt? You ever meet Dave or any of the Van Halen guys?
I have not, but it's funny. I just saw David Lee Roth in Atlantic City a month ago and at the casino, and I was eating dinner with my buddy Mark, and I was talking to this girl I know there, and probably we missed it by 30 seconds. Dave literally came down the elevator, walked through the casino, and right into the entrance of the venue, and there were only 3 people that were kind of there, and he took selfies with all of them, which was amazing. But, he seemed really, really cool. And it makes me think, too, like Eddie's legacy, right? Like, how do you keep his music alive, go forward for new generations? I mean, yeah, it was great seeing Dave out there. He had a great guitar player, Al Estrada. We had a guitar protege from Canada, on a young kid in his late 20s called Jason DeRaps, who's, he made his fame basically posting his videos of Van Halen covers on the Van Halen website that got picked up by their news channel. So it's one of those things that I feel like his guitar playing will live forever as long as there's a means for it to come out. The Sammy Hagar, Michael and Anthony band, will it ever come around again? There's so many years these guys are going to play. But you got to think that this is going to be one guitar player that future generations, 10, 20, 30 years are going to carry forward.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I mean, this guy has done something that, like I said, there was Jimi Hendrix, there was Eddie Van Halen. I mean, people will be paying homage to him in 100 years from now. The stories will get more intense, and just his playing, I don't think I can never see him ever being forgotten about, like Mozart, like Beethoven. He's right there, I mean, he took that playing to a whole different level. I mean, there's so many guitar players, so many really good guitar players, but, when you've done something at that level and that extreme, it'll be celebrated, long hundreds of years after, we're no longer here.
Keith, let me ask you, I'm not a guitar player, but you are. Now, when you say his guitar playing, was it not so much his leads, but his rhythm playing, just the arrangement of these songs, his ear for pitch? What was it about Eddie, in your musician opinion, that made him stand out from everyone else?
You just never heard anything like it. Like, when I heard Eruption for the first time, I was saying at Macy's on 34th Street, I was like, what is going on here? Like, you couldn't even wrap your head around it. You heard great solos like Alvin Lee 10 years after Woodstock. That's a monumental performance. You saw a lot of the Jimi Hendrix stuff, and, Jeff Beck is a freak, but this is next level freakish. And the way it was, captured on vinyl, it was just like, but the one thing I always loved about them, as I was saying earlier, is that there was always a song there. You hear a lot of other guys like emulate what he did, but there's no song. It's just mishmash. It's just, it drives me fucking crazy. I don't want to hear it. It's like, but Eddie, it all worked in the song. And it's just like, I remember Adrian Smith from Iron Maiden was saying the first time he heard Van Halen, and he was a guitar player and, kind of playing professionally at that point, he was ready to quit. He's like, I don't even know what's going on here. Like, what is happening? It was like a freak, and then when people understood it, and then, you realize where he got some stuff, but it was like, that next level, I mean, listen, I never aspired to be I'm a guitar player, but I never aspired to be a guy like, Eddie Van Halen. I'm a songwriter. So I play guitar more like for rhythmic and like Tom Petty. And, I don't really play leads. And so I never aspired to be Eddie Van Halen, but I play in a band with a guy like Ross the Boss, who is a legendary guitar player. Yeah. And he was saying that the first time they met him, the Dictators were playing the Whiskey A Go-Go, and Van Halen came to see them because he was hip to like Ross and liked his playing. And there was a mutual friend that they had who was a girl. And the girl had said to Andy Chernoff from the Dictators, like, he's better than Ross. Oh, come on. No one's better than Ross. It's like, and like, Ross probably a young kid with and then they saw Van Halen after that. And they're like, holy shit, maybe he is better than Ross. I mean, but anyway, that's the way, when I heard it, it was shocking, and it was like, the rhythm playing was great, but that was reasonable. It was just the lead stuff. You just never heard, that kind of playing, but with such feel to it, it's just such feel to it.
Well, obviously it's in the DNA,
right?
With his father. But I think after reading the Brothers book and being a Van Halen fan all these years, just consuming everything, the Renoff books, all of that, the fact that the family came from Holland when he was 8 years old, they were immigrants, they were minorities, they didn't have anyone, and that guitar and that music was his best friend. And throughout his entire life, he always leaned on it. And he said he wasn't a rock star. I'm just a kid that plays fucking guitar, and he just wanted to be alone. So I think when you mix all that together in those early albums and all the way up and through the Sammy years, let's not minimize the contribution that he did with Sammy, because Eddie Van Halen, outside of his music, the mark he left outside the technical end, the advancements of guitars and, all the mixers and phasers and tubes and all that stuff, that's what made him rich. So it's just truly, truly amazing what Eddie brought to the music world.
Yeah,
outside of his music.
And I think you nailed it. He was always a student right to the end. He was a student of music, and that was his passion. That was his best friend all those years, and having the insight to create sounds and to work on, different sounds and wiring, and just have that ability. There's a lot of things that, what's amazing is the Kramer building in Neptune, New Jersey. I see it quite a bit because a lawyer rents that building, owns that building. So every time I go in there, I kind of sneak around the back and see where, and also my old guitar player from Frankenstein 3000, the late great Tommy DeFaro, he worked at Kramer. So he met Edward several times when he used to come up there and, and he would sit and play and, work on things. I know he did some, even some modifications in New Jersey. He was close with the whole Kramer people, but, you could feel that legacy of a guy that spent a lot of time in that room. Call me crazy, or maybe that's just my own little thing, but just a student of the music. And also, as you know, Van Halen was a cover band, right? When they started out, and, he grinded his teeth learning Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin songs and learning them his way. Like Jimmy Page even said that he learned by playing other people's music, and he learned it wrong. But, instead of playing like a G chord, instead of moving his hands around, the ways that they learned these songs helped them become who they were, gave them their stamp. And I think Edward was like that, I mean, I listened to some of those cover shows when they were doing like Kiss and Rainbow and James Gang. And it's just so awesome. It's so awesome.
Awesome.
Imagine being able to, be at a club and seeing them. And I know the guy from Black Flag, Greg Ginn, was friends with Eddie. They used to go to like keg parties or knew each other from keg parties. He's a great guitar player too, but seeing him in the early days when they used to play those keg things, he knew he was a freak,
Keith, you're talking about I'm not a musician, I'm not a guitar player, but to me the uniqueness that you point out stands out in some of the songs. And I was thinking, think of songs like Unchained and Mean Street and Pound Cake even, right? You'll hear these songs on the radio, but there's 10,000 other rock and metal songs that are played on regular basis on radio and Sirius XM, and you kind of get sick of them after a while. But when you hear songs like that and you hear that guitar work, it still gets you excited. And that's the uniqueness of Eddie Van Halen. The other thing I observed was there are times in certain songs that Eddie took a back seat for the betterment of the song. Like I think of a song like Dirty Movies, right? How cool is the aura of the song, what the topic is about, Alex's drum and Dave's going off, and you almost don't know Ed's there. And he's just kind of noodling around in the background and he's supporting the songs. And there's a lot of songs like that where he doesn't have to get up there and rip. Spanked, Amsterdam, or a couple of other songs I say where look at how good he is in respect to how the whole song set, holds up.
That's what I was saying earlier, man. It's like, it was all about the song. And listen, some of the stuff he played was really, really simple, like really, it was all about the tune. I mean, Fair Warning example, like you were talking about. So This Is Love. Think about how that song starts, right? The mix, the bass and drums up really loud. And then you can hear in the mix him bringing it down, and to the dynamics. Like who does that? Bands that, create that environment, that whole, motion picture in your head. They thought outside of the box. They thought old school, new school. They just had fun. And the people that, a lot of guys you probably grew up with that were, it's not played exactly like that. No, he's adding this fifth or what, they sit there and wait. And meanwhile, Van Halen was making records every year. And when they ran out of ideas, they just put a cover. They just did a bunch of covers and had fun with it. And they put their own stamp on it. But Eddie, it was all about the song. And that's what makes him better than all of them. All of them. You could take all those guys, the Yngwies, the Steve Vais, every one of them. They're all phenomenal. They're all great. My favorite thing that Steve Vai ever did was the album he did with Public Image Limited, because he thought out of the box and he played with John Lydon. I got a lot of love and respect for him, but Eddie, the song always came first. They used to do what? KC and the Sunshine Band, right? They used to cover that kind of stuff too. It was, and even his playing in some of those bootlegs where he kind of held back. He just understood music, and there'll never be another one like him. Nobody.
Well, you talk about the covers and you talk about that. That's all Roth, because Roth brought to the party. He said, listen, we got to play tunes that these girls could dance to.
True.
They want to look at you. You're a guitar hero, but we got to dance KC and the Sunshine Band and ZZ Top and all that stuff. And you know what? To take a time machine and go back to 1975 in Pasadena, and that's my wet dream. That is,
well, we remember.
That's my.
Right. We remember 1975, right? I mean, I remember it clearly,
1970. Well, today, the anniversary of Kiss Alive 1.
That's right.
50 years ago today.
Yeah.
I was in fourth grade, but that's a whole nother show. But, just doing all that. And while you mentioned songs like Unchained and So This Is Love and Pound Cake, I mean, it goes on and on. Stuff off Women and Children First. Take Your Whiskey Home. Are you kidding me? Push Comes to Shove from Fair Warning. That's not blazing guitar solos, but it's the juju and the vibe of EVH and Dave. That combination. That is what's... Keith, you're going to add something.
No, I just realized that I lied to you, but because we are the exact same age. I said I was 57, right?
Yeah, it's 2025. No, September 2025.
All right, no, I'm going to be 59 in November. I was born in 66, so I am 58 years old. I mean, sometimes I get stuck on that, but I realize I don't want to. I realize that I'm so habit forming of saying 57. But when you said fourth grade, I'm like, I was in fourth grade, and I'm like, yeah, I'm 50, and then I'm like, no, I said 57 earlier. So I want to clarify that.
Well, I repeated eighth grade, but so the fourth grade. 1975. Well, when I was in fourth grade, we did Kiss and the Talent Show, and I remember we did Rock and Roll All Night.
Okay, yeah,
from Kiss Alive 1. And
well, as I look at my license, it's 11/26/66. So, what year were you born?
I was born in 67, July 67.
Okay, so you just turned 58. I'm going to be
just turned 58.
So, are you worried about the big 60?
I can't do anything about it. I'm thinking about having a party, man. You know what I mean? I feel good. I'm still around. I got great friends like you guys. We'll see what happens. But are you worried about it?
No. I mean, listen, I'm that's why I love being in a band like the Dictators, because I'm a kid compared to those guys. Yeah. You know what I mean? You got a drummer, Blue Oyster Cult Albert, who's 78. But, you meet people now that are in their 60s and 50s and 40s, and it just seems like there's one big, it's a different time. I mean, I used to look at my parents' high school yearbook pictures, and they look like they were 60 when they were in high school. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like it's a different time. And, look at the Rolling Stones. I mean, I saw them last year, and that was the best I ever saw the Stones. And, I would like to, and also, getting back to Van Halen with David Lee Roth, though, coming out of retirement and sounding pretty damn good from all the clips. I didn't get to see him in Atlantic City. You did, Walt, but I mean, I would love to see Dave. I hope I get a chance to see Dave.
He's, he continues to reinvent himself. And you know what? Not only did he have a great band, he had these 4 male backing musicians that were the showcase of the show. Dave knows how to put on a show, and he had these guys that everybody was watching, and he's a showman first.
Yeah, I mean, when he did that Rocklahoma thing, and I was like, not knowing what it was going to be like and sound like, and I'm like, you know what? I'm glad he's back. I mean, but we should be happy and appreciate that we still have a guy like David Lee Roth, out there and performing, because these guys are getting older, man. So it's like appreciate what you got and that they're still out there doing it.
Exactly.
Well, you know what, Keith? We want to thank you for taking the time this afternoon. Anything else you want to promote? You got the Dictators, got Sirius. We're siblings on Pantheon, Rockstrap. How's the podcast with Don going?
Oh, we have a lot of fun. Don's my brother. And by the way, Don Jamieson is older than me. Let that be known. But
yeah,
not by much, but he's in our group thing. We talk about this a lot, but my solo record that came out in April, they're on a second pressing of The Law of Diminished Returns, which made me really happy. Very proud of that record. They dropped a single that's wasn't on the record that came out in May. So The Law of Diminished Returns, my solo record. Dictators album. We're actually working on a new record right now, Dictators, which is a re-recording of some of the classic songs, some new songs, some covers. So it's going to be like kind of an odds and sods thing. And dates coming up, a lot of dates next year with the Dictators. And we have some starting in October. October 30th, we're cruising around the Hudson, and Steve Conti, who you may know from the New York Dolls, and Michael Monroe Band, he's playing with us. We did some shows with him earlier in the year. So some Dictator shows, music, and that's really it. Check out my solo record.
Best source to contact everything Keith Roth, decoentertainment.com.
Deco Entertainment, you can get the record, Amazon. I'm on Facebook. I'm kind of anti-social media, but I still do the Facebook. I eventually will go on Instagram, but Dictators, Instagram, we see all that stuff. So yeah, Dictators, Instagram, me on Facebook, whatever. My Messenger hasn't worked. my Facebook is a frustrating thing. I know you guys are doing a show, but it goes on and then it stops working. And then you go through all these trials and then you get it going again. Then it goes down again in a day or two. So if you've been leaving me messages, it works when it feels like it. So.
And what's your schedule over on Sirius? I know you're on Hair Nation, Boneyard. Where can we find you there?
Ozzy's Boneyard, Monday through Saturday, 6 p.m. to midnight. And Hair Nation, noon to 6, 7 days a week.
All right. Well, you're a busy cat for a 58-year-old. Again, thanks for spending the afternoon with us. Keith Roth, Sirius XM. And listeners, remember, if you dig what we're doing, get up to metalmayhemroc.com, check out the merch page, subscribe to the pod, leave a review, and leave us a comment in this YouTube video, your favorite Van Halen moment, song, album, Sammy or Dave, because it's all about Eddie. For my co-host, Metal Walt, our guest, Keith Roth, I'm the Vernomatic, and we are Metal Mayhem ROC.
Metal for life.
Thank you for listening to Metal Mayhem ROC. Check out our website at metalmayhemroc.com for information on podcasts, archives, links to all our live radio shows, and all sorts of info. Please like, follow, and share with everyone, even your non-metal friends. And always remember to keep it heavy.